So hopefully that's shared.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just put it on slideshow. So hopefully that's like come up straight on everyone's screen. But yeah, thank you for your time today. So this is going to be a show and tell on an innovation lead project I've done as part of my master's at the University of South Wales. And the project's titled, How Can the Welsh Public Sector Attract People to Digital Roles? What I'm going to do today is first is give a quick, very brief introduction to the project. And then this project's followed the Design Council's Double Diamond process, which follows 4 stages: discover, define, develop, deliver. So I'm going to walk through what I've done in these stages, talk about what I did and the results from that as well. And then I'll finish off just with a few recommendations, and then we'll have time for sort of any thoughts you've got, any questions you've got at the end. So if I start with the introduction then. So as I mentioned, this show and tell walks through an innovation lead project, which focuses on how the Welsh public sector can attract people to digital roles. And this project aims to help the Welsh public sector attract a diverse range of people to digital. And this is to help with 2 of the Welsh Government's strategic targets. The first, highlighted in the digital strategy, is to create a workforce that has the digital skills, capability and confidence to excel in the workplace and everyday life. And the second, highlighted in a workforce equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, is to address the underrepresentation of disabled people and people from minority ethnic communities in employment in the Welsh public sector. And the project ran from June to the end of July. That's the introduction. I'll start talking about sort of what I actually did. So I started off with the discover phase. The discover phase is all about exploring the problem space and the users within it. So for me, the discover phase was made up just completely of research, really. And the research we did was driven by the goals we sort of co-designed with you earlier, right back at the start of June. And those research goals were to understand why people consider applying for a digital role in Wales, discover how people view digital in the Welsh public sector, and understand how the Welsh public sector can create a more diverse workforce. To answer these goals, I decided to conduct semi-structured interviews to achieve answers, and I split these interviews into 2 rounds. So the first round was with 4 people who had recently changed career into digital. And then the second round was with 2 people who champion employment needs of disabled people in Wales, and another person, so a third person, who champions the employment needs of ethnic minority communities in Wales as well. And participants in this research represented different organisations, and we had a mix of demographics too. The research was analysed through affinity diagramming, which is a thematic analysis technique. This essentially means grouping together related notes and building findings up from the data. So like a bottom-up approach to analysis. And that's the research. So on to some of the key things we found out. Now I'm going to focus, for the purpose of show and tell, focus on 5 important findings. But there are a few more which I've included in the research report that I shared last Friday. So if you want to find out more or see anything else that I haven't talked about, it's all sort of in there. The first finding, and I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, but people do not know what digital is. So participants in the research explained that before they actually worked in digital and made that career shift, they thought digital was IT or digital marketing. All participants explained that IT, technology, or digital marketing wasn't something that interested them, meaning that previously, before joining digital, they wouldn't have been proactively seeking out digital roles. And participants said even when they did come across digital jobs, they talked about not understanding those roles by their title. Participants explained as well that they were using terms from their previous industries when they were seeking new employment. So when they were looking for new jobs, they were using similar terms to the jobs that they were previously familiar with in the industry they were working. So that meant that digital roles weren't coming up in their searches either. Additionally, all participants said that they were completing digital tasks in previous jobs without knowing. So even though they because they didn't know what digital was, they were completing really familiar to us digital tasks. They weren't able to link those tasks to digital. So they didn't know that that's what they were doing at the time. And all this meant the participants had to do quite a lot of research into digital and digital jobs to start to understand the industry and the roles involved. When understanding and working in digital, so after participants did cross over and started working in the digital industry, they all said that one of their favorite aspects is the focus on how we can help people. Now, many participants mentioned that this would be their key message if they were trying to sell digital to people. So if they were talking to themselves like 2 years ago who didn't know what digital was, they would put a lot of emphasis on that. Digital is for people and on that sort of user-centered design space. That's the first finding. The second finding is that people feel that the digital culture doesn't quite fit in public sector organisations. Participants in the research explained that they view digital in the Welsh public sector as something that's very much in its infancy. Many participants said that they think this is because public sector organisations do not currently have the right culture to fully adopt digital. Half of participants explained that they feel like public sector organisations, and this is wider than the Welsh public sector, talking more about the UK public sector now, are bureaucratic and large, where it's difficult to get things done. Another participant mentioned that they view public sector organisations as too slow and too old to embrace and realise the benefits of digital. However, some participants did talk about how they liked this challenge. They liked working in digital in the Welsh public sector because it has that potential. Because it has that potential to grow, and they get to play a part in growing that. They mentioned that they didn't want to go somewhere where it is really digitally mature and just sort of slot in, and then they're just like another person doing the same as what everyone else does. They liked having that opportunity to really shape what digital means for organisations in the Welsh public sector. And this really ties into why a lot of the participants spoke about wanting to work in the public sector in the first place. So most participants explained that the feeling of making a positive social impact is what draws them to public sector work. Participants mentioned that they want to feel like they're solving important problems that benefit people. And by growing digital in the Welsh public sector, participants felt that they're solving a big problem to help people in Wales. And it's something and like a message and a sort of mission that they really identified with. Thirdly, roles need to satisfy people's needs. So as well as the strong feeling of public service motivation the participants had in this research, participants all had personal needs that needed to be satisfied for them to consider applying for roles as well. So for one participant, for example, this was salary. Increasing their salary was something that was important to them. They explained that if salary was not on a job application, for example, they wouldn't even bother applying for that role. For other participants, it was personal development. One participant explained that they need to feel intellectually stimulated and like they're growing in their role. Another participant told us how they felt like they would be at a disadvantage in the job market if they did not understand digital. So really, they wanted to experience working in digital and really progress their understanding of digital too. Some participants also mentioned how a social culture within an organisation has a big impact on whether they would be interested in working there as well. So what I'm trying to get at with this really is that there's no sort of single thing that attracts people to roles. So everyone has their own key need, depending on their situation and outlook. When we did the activity to define research goals all the way back in June, one thing we wanted to find out was if money was the big driver for digital in the public sector. And I suppose in short, the answer is no. The research found that there are a number of things people consider when looking for a role, all with different levels of importance. So for some of the participants, money was a priority and it would have been the most important thing. For others, money was pretty far down their list, and there's a lot of other sort of reasons why they wanted to work in digital in the public sector. However, there was some commonalities. So one thing that all participants did mention is a need for roles to be easy to find and simple to apply for. People do not want to spend time doing extra research. They want all the information about a job up front. So one participant explained how frustrating they found looking for a job for a local authority in Wales because they needed to enter the like 22 different websites. They said that they didn't have like a specific local authority in mind. They just wanted to work in local government in Wales. So having to go into each individual website was frustrating for them. And other participants explained that they sort of just relied solely on LinkedIn really when it came to looking for new careers. And the reason being was that all participants said that it's sort of just like because all different roles are in a single place, and it gives them the ability to search and filter, like compare and contrast sort of roles they want. So this does suggest that if organisations in Wales are not putting their jobs on sites like this, they are likely to be missed by like quite a lot of candidates. And the fourth finding, people do not want employers to know they are disabled or from ethnic minority communities. Participants talked about how they and people that they work with do not want to declare that they are disabled or from minority ethnic backgrounds. And this was to such an extent where participants explained that it's common for disabled people to not ask for support that they are entitled to in an interview process or at work because they're concerned that they will be penalised for this. Additionally, one participant told us that they don't just not declare their ethnicity or religion, but they also change their personal information to prevent people from guessing their ethnicity or religion. The participant explained that they do this by using their parents' address, who, as they explained, and in their words, live in a better area than them. And this is something that's consistent with like larger quantitative studies completed into something called application whitening. And application whitening is the process of making yourself appear whiter in job applications with the hope of increasing your chances of getting a job. So this really highlighted that some people in Wales do not feel confident to be themselves when applying for roles. And then last finding on this discover phase, organisations need to be proactive for people. So participants spoke about how disabled people are often unaware of what support and adjustments are available to them when they are applying for a role. Participants explained that this is often because they simply don't know what to ask for, or that they are unaware that they are disabled, or again, that they do not have the confidence to inquire about what is available to them. And these aren't like mutually exclusive. It could be a case of someone's feeling all three. Participants highlighted that they believe the burden should not be on the person to have to ask for support. The onus should be on the organisations to be proactive and offer this to everyone. Participants suggested that this would have the additional benefit of normalising the process of using for support for disabled people too. So there's sort of like 5 important findings that came out of the research at the discover phase. I'll move on to the define phase now. And the define phase involved reviewing all of those insights gathered in the discover phase to give the project a clear understanding of the problems users had. And I did this by writing up the findings in the research report that I shared with you, sort of like as I was going along, so I had a clear idea of what the problems were. But also, I created personas and user needs too. So these personas on your screen are in the appendix of the research report I shared with you if you want a closer look. And personas, for me, are a depiction of users based on their common goals, behaviors, motivations, feelings, thoughts, and so on and so forth. So I haven't put any like demographic information in here. I've tried to go to like a deeper sort of level of detail and just focus on what people want to do, what their goals are, and what their pain points are, so what's preventing them from doing that. And I put personas together for this project because there was a lot of information being discovered about people, and as you could tell by those 5 findings I just read out, all of it's like quite broad. And I wanted to consolidate that information to help in like really defining the problems different user groups have and designing for those problems. And then the second thing I did to help with understanding what users actually needed, I wrote user needs for each persona group and brought user needs in from the general affinity diagram and analysis completed on the initial research too. I then grouped related user needs together and prioritized user needs based on quantity and impact. And by that, I mean, so for quantity, how many different users have the same or similar need? So that would be prioritized. And by impact, I meant the impact the user need sort of had on a user. So if it wasn't satisfied. So for instance, if it's a user need that's like quite significant, like if it isn't satisfied, it actually prevent them from applying for a role, that need was prioritized as well. And once grouping the user needs and prioritizing by which were most important for users, I generated some how might we statements to transition my thinking from current situation to what the future situation could be. And I ended up with 3 how might we statements, which was followed. How might we help people search for jobs more easily? How might we make job applications equitable? And how might we help people to understand what digital means? So these were the 3 areas of focus defined in the define stage and with 3 areas of focus for the project going forward. And then after that define phase, I moved on to the develop phase. And this stage focused on the generation of ideas to help solve the problems that had been defined in the previous stage. And to generate ideas, I used a pretty straightforward brainstorming technique. So to follow a lateral thinking approach, I put down as many ideas as possible. And at this stage, this was very much about quantity over quality, which was very lucky for me because some of those ideas really weren't quality. And having this quantity and range of ideas helped to open up different avenues to explore. And once these ideas were down, I then needed to prioritize them. And I did this by using a scorecard that included 4 measures. And these 4 measures were desirability, so the levels of which users wanted the solution, feasibility, the level of technical ease involved in delivering and adopting the solution, viability, so the level of financial sense provided by the solution, and the final one, integrity, so the level of positive social and environmental impact the solution could have. I should caveat this because this isn't like a science, so a lot of the time the scoring was sort of like done on my best guesses. But it did lead to 5 ideas being prioritized, which I will touch on just a little bit later. And that was the develop phase. And if I move on to the final phase of the project, the deliver phase, and this stage was concerned with testing small-scale solutions with users to improve the ones that will work, and just sort of like be able to discard the ones that won't. So this phase for me again was all about research and building the 5 prioritized ideas. So I had developed 3 hypotheses to test in this stage, being having all Welsh public sector digital jobs in one place will help people to find jobs. A more inclusive application process will help people feel more supported to apply for roles. And rebranding digital will make the industry more understandable for people. So they were the 3 hypotheses I was looking to test. And to test them, I did a round of concept testing with one person who had recently changed career into digital, one person who champions the needs of disabled people in Wales, and one person who is a leader in digital in Wales, and they currently recruit people for digital roles in the Welsh public sector. And next, I'll just walk through each idea and what we found out with the idea. So the first idea was called Welsh Public Sector DDAT Jobs Portal. All the names are that creative, so don't expect anything too fancy. They're all very literal. I apologize for that. But the first idea was for all Welsh public sector jobs to be displayed in a single place. So participants in the Discover phase spoke about wanting to find and compare digital jobs with little friction. And this idea really could have been taken a step further with like centralized DDAT recruitment rather than a portal, but the feasibility of that seemed challenging at best to impossible. But what we found when testing this idea with users, so most participants explained that they liked this idea, They said it would help them to know what digital jobs are available in the Welsh public sector. Also, they spoke about it giving them assurance that these roles are truly digital, so like validating the roles in some way. However, all participants did ask how someone would know it is there in the first place. They stated that this wouldn't be any good if no one searched for it. So they suggested that it would need to come with like a big sort of communication drive as well. And some participants talking about how when it comes to recruitment, it's easier to like be proactive and go to that person rather than sitting and waiting for them to come. So they questioned whether it would work. But a bigger challenge for this was that the participant who recruits people for digital roles did not believe that organizations offering a lower salary would be comfortable posting jobs here. They used the example of a local authority in Wales, saying that they won't be able to pay people as much as other organisations, potentially because of their budgets. So why would they upload their jobs to the site? They felt that people would just find the role they wanted and filter at the top on the wage and just pick the sort of wage with the top roles. All participants did suggest that a step towards a solution like this would be to standardise the names of roles in the Welsh public sector so people know what to search for. One participant in particular explained that they work currently in a Welsh local authority, and I won't mention their role, but they've got the role is sort of like described quite vaguely, but it is a digital role. And they're currently struggling when looking for new digital jobs to align what their role is with other digital roles. And this has been something that's really difficult for them, and it's having quite a significant impact on them. So standardising roles in the Welsh public sector might be a more feasible way of going some way to sort of satisfying the same need. And then I did mention how uncreative the titles of these ideas are. Anonymized applications based on role-related questions. No prizes for guessing what this one is. So the second idea was for applications to focus on role-related questions rather than experience, rather than like CVs or cover letters. Many disabled people and people from ethnic minority communities have lesser experience in digital roles than others. So focusing on knowledge could provide potentially a more like equal opportunity for them. Also, this idea includes anonymized applications. So assessors do not see any demographic information when sifting through applications. And this is to try to like lessen bias in application assessments. And what we found, so all participants liked the idea for applications to be anonymized, with some participants stating that this is a practice that's quite common and that they do follow now. They believe that it will ensure people are selected based on the criteria that matters. Most participants liked that the application was based on role-related questions, highlighting a difference between knowledge and experience. Participants explained that someone working somewhere for a number of years is not an indicator for how knowledgeable or skilled they are at that role. They believe that role-related questions will give a better idea of knowledge and skill. Most participants said that this would help streamline the application process for organisations by helping them get to the people who know the role quickly. However, one participant did say it can be a challenge for organisations to change their recruitment process like really slightly in the public sector. So they did question the feasibility of this idea, with it being like such a significant stage, such a significant change. So questioned like with the banding system, how would like role-related questions sort of match that with pay and things? So there's a lot of like feasibility questions around this as an idea. The third idea was accepting job applications through different mediums. So it's about enabling people to apply for jobs through whatever channel they're comfortable and confident using. So participants in the first round of research explained how written job applications can disadvantage people who are disabled, particularly with people who have things like dyslexia. So what we found was that all participants liked this idea. Some of the reasons why were sort of unintended when designing, so it wasn't something we were designing for or something we thought would work. But some participants explained it would be better for them simply because they feel that they come across better spoken than when they write. Another participant mentioned how we can help people like interaction designers to show off their work rather than writing an application, so like portfolio style job applications. However, all participants highlighted that the more inclusive an application process is, and participants in this research felt that this would be more inclusive, the better. They said that this concept enables people to apply in their own voice. Also, they said that this would open up a more diverse recruitment pool for organizations. Although one participant did highlight again how it would be hard to get this signed off by recruitment in the public sector. So similar challenge to the one mentioned previously. However, for this, they said it wouldn't be impossible, and they felt like this would be more feasible than the idea before, which is around like role-related questions. The fourth idea, titled Upfront Offerings of Support Equipment. So this was about proactively offering support to candidates who are applying for roles and the people who have recently joined an organization as well. So the concept looks to remove the potential of someone having to declare themselves as disabled to get the help and support they need when applying to and working for an organization. And what we found was that all participants liked this idea, explaining that it helps disabled people to feel that they will be supported. Also, participants mentioned how it shifts the responsibility from the disabled person to the organizations. One participant said that if organizations want to recruit from a diverse pool, it's their responsibility to proactively offer support. One participant explained that even though they aren't disabled, this would benefit them because they felt unsure about what was okay to ask for when they did start their role. So they didn't know if they could ask for an office chair or a desk, for instance. One participant did mention that it might be difficult for organizations with less money to offer all these things to its employees or advertise these things proactively. However, this was an idea that tested well and received a lot of support from the participants in the research. And then finally, rebranding I couldn't say digital. The last idea was about rebranding digital. Many participants in the discover stage spoke about not understanding what digital was. This idea looked to suggest changes to that. What we found when doing the research, so all participants spoke about how people do not know what digital means, so they agreed with our finding in the discover phase and supported that. However, participants were also unsure as to how they would rename it or rebrand it. Most participants suggested rather than rebranding digital, it should be broken down and explained. So they felt that digital is currently too broad a term and there's too many different activities and different teams sitting within digital. Participants said that they felt it was unfeasible to rebrand digital because organizations really were at the mercy of the industry. They didn't feel it was feasible for one organization to change this because it would just be sitting outside of digital and it just wouldn't work. Participants felt that clear and consistent terminology would go some way to improve understanding of digital. They felt this was particularly important around job roles. So really the key findings from this round of concept testing was that the first idea, so that was all digital jobs in one place. And the last idea, rebranding digital, weren't feasible. However, they both pointed to a need that was identified in the discover phase, but not designed for, which was to standardise digital jobs across the Welsh public sector to make it easier for people to compare and look for roles. The middle three ideas about making the application process more equitable tested well. They were all liked by participants and can all exist next to each other, so they weren't mutually exclusive ideas. Only one participant for each idea highlighted how it could be tricky for organizations, but not one participant said this would be impossible or unfeasible or anything like that. And that brings me on to the recommendations made by the project. So just 3 recommendations. And the first being to feasibility assess role standardization. So the interviews found that people did not understand the terms used for digital roles. And then the concept testing found that even amongst digital roles in the Welsh public sector, job titles are inconsistent and confusing for people who are currently hold those roles. So standardising the names and core responsibilities of these roles will help people inside and outside of the Welsh public sector to understand what these roles are and be able to progress their career in digital. The second was to explore inclusive recruitment processes, more inclusive recruitment processes, I should say. And in the interviews, participants explained how they did not feel comfortable declaring their disability or ethnicity. In the concept testing, participants liked applications with anonymity. Is that how you say? Anonymous applications. They liked proactive support offerings, and they liked flexible application channels as well. So different ways you can apply for the role. Making the recruitment process more accessible will offer a more diverse candidate pool. This will bring digital in the Welsh public sector more people, as it will include people who have previously been uncomfortable applying, but also people with skills, experience and perspectives from communities that are currently underrepresented, helping to make Welsh public sector services work for all. And then finally, break digital down into its parts. So participants in the interviews explained how they wish they knew what digital meant sooner. They said if they did know what digital meant sooner, they would have applied for these roles a lot sooner and they would have had a longer career and much more experience in digital. Participants in the concept testing said to focus less on rebranding digital and more time explaining the different components within it. Explaining to people the parts within digital should offer a clearer understanding than digital as a whole. So breaking it down by like design, delivery, technology, etc. And the other recommendations, and thank you for listening. Any thoughts or questions, please? Stop sharing.
I don't mind going first. I think the one that highlighted for me was the I really like and I really agree with asking role-based questions and making it really inclusive. So it's not based on your experience, it's what you can do and what you have to offer, rather than, you know, have you had a role like this before? I love that. I think the flip side of that was then that different application ideas and then offering things like portfolios. Because if you want to be more situational based and look kind of forward facing in terms of what can you bring to this role, a portfolio doesn't really lend itself to that. So I think that was the bit for me where I was a bit like, I don't know how you could do both those things.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think, so the portfolio was more a suggestion from one of the participants saying, oh yeah, if you did this, you know, like the different mediums, you could do this too. I think that third idea with the different mediums was more just about sort of like accepting job applications if someone just wanted to do a voice note rather than writing the application.
Yeah.
And it was really that idea came about because one participant mentioned that they work with someone who is dyslexic, who has to have a lot of support to write like CVs and cover letters and things. But it puts that person in like quite a difficult position because it's like they're replying then not in their own voice. So they like struggled with, even though they had that support, they struggled with having someone write it for them. So it's more just like really about letting people be able to speak to submit a job application rather than writing.
Yeah, I fully agree with that as well. Yeah.
Dive in next, if that's all right. Chris, I thought that was brilliant. Thank you very much. Really, really good. Lovely research, clearly laid out. Great suggestions, you know, the recommendations are good. Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. Just jumping on what Joe was saying, and I'm probably stereotyping now but from the people I've seen in my experience, I agree with that idea of offering them different ways of applying, you know, the portfolio or the voice or whatever, because I don't know, it is a stereotypical way of thinking about it, but people who are really technical, who are absolutely brilliant at interrogating databases or setting up technical architecture or I don't know, writing code, whatever it happens to be, they're very good at that sort of thing and may not be the best at communicating in an interview situation. And I don't want them to be good at interviewing. I want them to be good at fixing the code or, you know, interrogating that database. So why am I interviewing them? Do you know what I mean? And you know, it is a terrible stereotype because there are people who are brilliant at all sorts of bits of that. But that's a really interesting one, and it has made me think, you know, like you say, the chap with the dyslexia, or I guess it's a chap, I don't know, the person with dyslexia, we're forcing them to apply in a way that's not the best for them. And that's really, really interesting. There's so much in there that's interesting. I've been making thousands of notes, so appreciate it. I've got the report open as well, and I'm thinking, that's true, yeah, how do we do that? So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And I think there are definitely some kind of practical things we can do straight away. Things like offering assistive technologies, you know, on that list of when you first started in an organisation. That's something we can offer, you know, straight away, isn't it? So I think things like offering a jobs portal, a bit more long term, maybe, and a bit more thinking, a bit more work. But there were certainly some things there that we can, you know, pick up, adopt, share back then and wider across the public sector in Wales, what's going well, what isn't. You know, it's that we're not going to be able to make it perfect straight away, but we can start leading by example and demonstrating the value and kind of testing some of these ideas out as well.
Yeah, and I think, I think there's some things in there which are like quite sort of, I hate the phrase, but like quick wins, where, and I'm quite confident in like those research findings, but I'm also sort of conscious that with particularly like the concept testing, so the last round of research, it wasn't done with like a lot of participants from the different user groups. So there's some of the ideas there, particularly like the bigger ones, will need to be explored and researched further. But I think with some of them, particularly around the first round of findings, so the findings of the people who recently moved into digital and the people who are disabled and from ethnic minority communities as well, I'm pretty like confident in those findings.
You know, one of the other ones was that central job site. I know Joe was saying, you're right, Joe, it's a long-term thing. We've had chats with various organisations about this. And everybody says, oh yeah, CDPS should do that. That would be great if CDPS did that. Yeah, hang on a minute. That's an entire service that would need, you know, a lot of work, a lot of thinking about, a lot of setting up. But you're right, you know, our whole mantra is about being user-centered. We're struggling, we know we're struggling to attract digital people and get them and keep them. So if we can make it easier by putting it all the available jobs in a standardized format, Lauren's been saying this for ages, standardized format, sell the benefits, you know, that sort of thing, in a standardized place, that would be lovely. And I'm delighted you pointed out as well that some organisations who can't pay as much as others will struggle to attract because they'd be filtered to the bottom. Basically, people would ignore them, and that raises lots of questions like, should they be paying more? You know, if it's a digital role, it's in high demand and there are other people doing it, should it be a priority for them? And in which case, should they do all that hard work of looking at their salary bandings and questions and job evaluations and all of that?
What I would say on that as well is I think that's an assumption which would be really interesting to explore. So that assumption works on the basis that if I was going to apply for a user researcher job, I just filter on the wage and go for the highest paid jobs. But it'd be interesting to explore if people would actually do that, because like it makes sense that some people would, but I also think if you were new to user research or coming from user research from like a junior user researcher, you might think, I don't want the top wage because it comes with that extra pressure. So maybe I want like a lower. I don't know the answer, but it'd be an interesting thing to find out, I think.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things you raised was about people have different reasons for wanting to work in the public sector as well. And money, as you said in the beginning, isn't necessarily the top and only one. So, you know, it might be location, it might be, you know, I don't know, it could be just the organisation itself, isn't it? You know, I've always wanted to work for Welsh Government or whoever it is.
Yeah, I was also going to sort of counteract that point that was raised around, say, local authorities or organisations that aren't able to necessarily pay the highest salaries, not wanting to put their jobs on that website. You know, their salaries are their salaries, and if they advertise it on their own website, they're not necessarily going to get loads of people applying to it as if they were able to sort of compare it to other roles. And the reality of the situation is they're always going to get the sort of equivalent skill set to match the salaries that they're offering. So I think the benefit of that wider sort of portal where people can share all of their roles is just the traffic that goes to the site, because you're always going to get somebody maybe knows somebody who can say, look, I saw this role, I think you'd be good for it. So I don't necessarily think that's a reason for them not to post their roles there, you know, because that issue is always going to be an issue for them regardless of where they post their jobs.
I agree, and I think there's that social purpose as well. You know, I've taken significant pay cuts in the past for a job I really wanted. I know others in CDPS today have, you know, taken pay cuts to do a role that they felt passionate about. And so I think there is that social value, and there is that, particularly with local government, I want to make a difference in my community or in my area, you know, in the people I live alongside, my family, my friends, that sort of thing. So I think there is that, Pete mentioned location and that kind of geographical pull of, I want to make a difference to this area, whether that's Wales as my country or, you know, the area I live in specifically.
I got one more really interesting one as well. They're all really interesting, but the rebranding digital, that whole concept, we come across this all the time. And I like what you suggested. You know, the breaking it down into the different roles. Like I know some of the titles of what I wrote it down, like innovation and human-centered design and that kind of thing. Just breaking it down. I do feel like we've got a huge, it's not a comms campaign, but it's almost like making people understand it, because it literally, it divides people, doesn't it? The word divides people in terms of, you know, I know it as digital marketing, I know it as, you know, IT, or I know it as, you know, whatever they know it as, because that's what they've come from. But you also get like an emotional reaction to the word digital, which is fascinating to me. And that depends on, you know, is it a brand new shiny phone that I'm delighted with? Or is it a new HR system in work that scares the living daylights out of me? You know, the people have totally different reactions to the word. And we often talk about dropping it, but maybe explaining it.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. I think you do get like a visceral sort of reaction when you hear digital. And I think before I worked in digital, I thought it was tech. So for me, it just wouldn't have been something I would have looked into at all. But I think interestingly, like CDPS is sort of like set up naturally into like digital being broken down. Like with you having like a user-centered design team, a delivery team, it's like broken down like that. So it's just like, I think being able to explain that to people, how this is what user-centered design is, this is why we have a user-centered design team.
I think as well, you know,
Yeah.
we preach a lot and we do a lot of work to help other service areas and other organisations to really de-jargon their areas. You know, we might talk to planning and to ask them to remove some of their technical or legal jargon, and, you know, so it's more accessible and easy to understand. So I think there's a challenge on us as well, that we don't want to teach people what it means. We almost want to make it in their terms and for their already understanding. So, you know, when we talk about content, for example, we're not talking, you know, content in itself is like, what does that mean? Is that words, is that pictures, is that, you know, it's talking about, oh, you know, how you understood that information about the service, you know, the language that they would use and, you know, relate to, and, you know, that brochure you had, or the website, how did the words feel, were there things, you know. So I think we've got a challenge as well of not using our own jargon and kind of practicing what we preach a lot, and using the language and the terminology that others use, so that it's not on them to understand it, it's on us to make it really easy and intuitive.
Yeah, it's the bit I find difficult is, I think a couple of participants mentioned that, like, but like, you know, sort of like call a spade a spade. So everyone working in digital is digital, isn't it? You wouldn't sort of like start calling a bricklayer something else because it didn't sort of like work for you. So it's like really tricky, isn't it? I suppose it's those different user groups, being people who don't know what digital is at the moment or misunderstand it, and people who currently work there. It's like a big difference of understanding.
I think we need a massive section on our webpage when you first land that explains what digital is. We should from our
All we need to
perspective.
put the effort, so it's not on our website. It's where,
Exactly. When we get to the point where we don't need it.
yeah, people don't have to come to us.
Brilliant.
Go where they are. Yeah.
So we've got some challenges then, Chris. We've got 3 recommendations: feasibility assessed, role standardization. Lauren and I talked about something like this in the past, and that's hard, but
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Explore inclusive recruitment. I think there's definitely things we can do and things we can recommend. You know, we can definitely do things internally and with people who are interested already. We've got good connections in there. And then breaking digital down, explaining it better in the right words, as Joe was saying, you know, use the words that people understand. Their vocabulary, not ours. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant.
No problem at all. Thank you for that. I'll just knock us off the code, but
I think